They mocked her, interrupted her, and tried to destroy her reputation. Now, they're the ones begging for mercy. Karoline Leavitt had faced tough interviews before. She was no stranger to pushback, especially from the liberal media, but this time was different. This wasn't just political banter or a heated exchange. It was a direct, calculated attack. She had been invited onto the talk show under the guise of discussing policy. That's how they framed it. But the moment she took her seat, she sensed the energy shift. The tension in the room wasn't the usual back and forth of differing opinions. It felt like an ambush. The first few questions were standard, even predictable. Then, without warning, one of the hosts leaned forward, his voice sharp with something more than skepticism. "Let's be real, Karoline. You're not here because of your qualifications. You're here because you're loyal. That's why you got the job, isn't it?" The audience reacted instantly. Gasps, murmurs, a few stifled laughs. Karoline's expression remained calm, but inside, she felt the shift. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was a performance, and she was the target. She took a steady breath, refusing to lose her cool. That's what they wanted. "I'm here because I've earned my place," she replied firmly. "If you disagree, let's talk policy, not personal attacks." But they didn't want policy. They wanted a reaction. Another host smirked, scanning the crowd before delivering the next blow. "Earned or handed? Because from where we're sitting, it looks like loyalty is the only real qualification these days." This time, the audience clapped. Karoline knew exactly what was happening. The segment had been planned, the lines rehearsed. The goal wasn't debate, it was humiliation. The next few minutes were a blur of interruptions, dismissive laughs, and leading questions designed to make her look incompetent. No matter what she said, it was twisted, reframed, or ignored entirely. The show wasn't about conversation, it was about control. But Karoline didn't crumble. She held her ground, firing back with facts and refusing to let them push her into an emotional outburst. As the segment wrapped up, the host doubled down. "Women like you set us back. You're a pawn, and deep down, you know it." The room fell silent. Even the audience didn't know how to react. Karoline's jaw clenched, not out of anger, but out of a deeper realization. They weren't attacking her because they believed what they were saying. They were attacking her because they were afraid. She smiled, slow and deliberate. "If standing up for my beliefs makes me a pawn, then so be it. But at least I'm not a puppet." The segment ended, the cameras cut, and the damage was done. Or so they thought. They underestimated one thing: the reaction that was coming next. The clip hit the internet like wildfire. Within hours, it was everywhere: Twitter, YouTube, every conservative news outlet. At first, the network tried to control the narrative, framing the segment as just another heated debate. But the full, unedited version painted a very different picture. Conservatives weren't just angry, they were livid. Comment sections flooded with accusations of media bias, double standards, and outright bullying. Even those who weren't die-hard supporters of Karoline couldn't deny what they had seen. This wasn't a debate, it was an attack. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag media bias. Hashtag stand with Karoline. Hashtag cancel the show. Republican politicians chimed in. Conservative commentators dissected the exchange frame by frame. And even some liberals admitted it was a bad look. But it didn't stop there. The show's sponsors started getting tagged. Viewers weren't just mad, they were strategic. They flooded advertisers with messages, asking why they were backing a platform that openly degraded women who didn't fall in line with their politics. Some companies tried to ignore it, others released generic statements, but then one of the biggest sponsors pulled out. Their statement was carefully worded, avoiding controversy while making it clear they didn't want to be associated with divisive and unprofessional discourse. That was the first domino. The rest followed fast. The network scrambled into damage control mode. Anonymous sources leaked reports of panic behind the scenes. Executives demanding explanations, frantic meetings about how to regain control. The show's hosts remained silent at first, then released a half-hearted statement about passionate discussions and differing perspectives. But it was too late. Karoline hadn't said a word publicly yet. She didn't have to. Whispers of a lawsuit began to swirl, not just for defamation, but for targeted harassment, professional damage, and possibly even coordinated media misconduct. The network had faced backlash before, but this was different. Karoline sat in a dimly lit office in Washington, D.C., across from her legal team. Stacks of documents lay on the table, some still warm from the printer. The stakes were clear. This wasn't just about a viral moment or political debate. It was about accountability. A senior attorney, a no-nonsense woman with years of media litigation experience, set her pen down and leaned back. "The defamation angle is strong," she said, "but we can also argue professional harm. This wasn't just criticism. It was an orchestrated attempt to discredit you." Karoline listened carefully. She wasn't the type to jump straight into legal battles, but this was different. This was about setting a precedent. The more they dug, the worse it got. Internal emails surfaced, leaked messages between producers and staff hinting that the segment had been pre-planned as an exposure piece, not a genuine interview. One line in particular stood out: "Make sure she stumbles. Cut her off if she gets too comfortable." That wasn't journalism. It was an ambush. By the next morning, news broke. Karoline Leavitt was officially pursuing legal action. The network's response was immediate and chaotic. Their lawyers rushed to issue statements, calling the lawsuit frivolous and a desperate political stunt. But the damage was already spreading. The lawsuit wasn't just about Karoline anymore. It was about media ethics, about how certain voices were treated on national platforms. The backlash deepened. More advertisers backed out, the show's ratings took a hit, and viewers on both sides of the aisle started asking the same question. If they had nothing to hide, why were they scrambling? Then, something unexpected happened. A former producer came forward, first anonymously, then publicly. In an exclusive interview, she admitted what many had suspected. The show had a history of coordinating attacks against conservative guests. Producers were instructed to push them into uncomfortable moments, cut them off, mock them subtly, and control the edit. She provided emails, memos, and even unedited footage from past interviews, making it clear that what happened to Karoline wasn't an accident. It was standard practice. Suddenly, this wasn't just a lawsuit. It was an exposé. The network was running out of ways to spin it. Inside their headquarters, the atmosphere was suffocating. Executives barked orders, legal teams huddled over conference tables, and PR specialists scrambled to craft the perfect damage control statement. They had dealt with controversies before, but this wasn't just another bad press cycle. It was a full-scale crisis. The network released an official statement, but it fell flat. "We stand by our commitment to free and open discussion," it read. "While we regret any misunderstanding, we maintain that our hosts acted within the bounds of spirited debate." It was a carefully worded non-apology, and it made things worse. Viewers saw right through it. By the next morning, the show's social media pages were in freefall. Comments were turned off, dislikes skyrocketed, and more advertisers severed ties, issuing vague statements about re-evaluating partnerships. The message was clear. Corporate sponsors didn't want the heat. Then came the first major internal casualty. One of the show's lead producers resigned. The press release called it a mutual decision, but insiders leaked the truth. They were trying to contain the fire. But it was too late. The legal proceedings had officially begun. Karoline's team subpoenaed internal records, looking for more proof of coordinated media bias and targeted defamation. What they found was worse than anyone expected. More emails, more memos, undeniable proof that the network wasn't just reporting news, they were manipulating it. Then came the biggest bombshell yet. A second former employee came forward. This time, it wasn't just about the talk show, it was about the entire network. They alleged that this wasn't an isolated incident, that certain guests were strategically discredited, shut down, and ridiculed to fit a pre-approved narrative. Suddenly, Karoline's case wasn't just about her. It was about the credibility of the entire media institution. As the legal battle heated up, the network had to face a chilling reality. They weren't just fighting Karoline anymore. They were fighting the truth. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled every available seat, their cameras and notebooks ready to capture every detail. Outside, the scene was even more chaotic. Protesters, supporters, media vans lined up for blocks. This wasn't just a lawsuit. It had become a cultural battleground. Karoline sat beside her attorneys, calm but focused. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment. The network's legal team was formidable, but she knew they weren't just fighting her. They were fighting their own past mistakes. The trial began with opening arguments. Karoline's lawyers laid it out plainly. This case isn't about political differences. It's about media accountability. Our client was targeted, discredited, and professionally harmed, not through honest journalism, but through calculated deception. Then came the evidence, the leaked emails, the producer's testimony, the unedited footage from previous interviews that showed a clear pattern of coordinated bias. Every piece tightened the noose around the network. Their defense team tried to argue that heated debate was normal, that Karoline was simply playing the victim. But then the former producer took the stand. She testified under oath that producers were given pre-show instructions to ensure conservative guests never came out looking strong. When she read one particular email out loud, the entire courtroom went silent. Do not let her finish full sentences. Keep control. Mock lightly. Make her lose credibility. That single line shattered any illusion that the interview had been fair. The network's attorneys fought back, calling the show's format entertainment, not journalism. They argued that guests should expect tough questioning. But Karoline's attorneys countered with something even stronger, a video montage, a direct comparison of how liberal guests were treated versus how conservatives were treated. One side showed respectful interviews, uninterrupted responses, and softball questions. The other showed constant interruptions, sarcasm, mockery, and cheap shots disguised as debate. The jury watched in silence. The contrast was undeniable. Then came the financial records. Karoline's team presented data proving that her reputation had suffered measurable damage. Speaking engagements canceled, opportunities withdrawn. It was a deliberate attempt to silence her. At that moment, the case shifted. This wasn't just a media controversy anymore. It was a reckoning. As closing arguments wrapped up, the jury had only one question to answer. Did the network cross the line? The entire country waited for the verdict. When the judge re-entered the courtroom, everyone held their breath. Karoline sat still, her hands folded in her lap. The network's legal team, once confident, now looked drained. The foreperson stood. In the matter of defamation and professional harm, we the jury find in favor of the plaintiff, Karoline Leavitt. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Karoline closed her eyes for a brief moment, exhaling as the weight of the past few months finally lifted. The damages were significant, a multi-million-dollar settlement, a public admission of wrongdoing. The network was forced to issue a formal apology, not just to Karoline, but to every guest who had been subjected to their tactics. But the fallout didn't stop there. The show was officially canceled. The network framed it as a restructuring decision, but everyone knew the truth. Advertisers weren't coming back. The brand was too toxic. More employees came forward, more unethical practices were exposed. This wasn't just a loss for the network. It was a turning point for political media. And Karoline? Her career didn't just survive, it thrived. She became a symbol of pushing back against media manipulation, landing book deals, speaking engagements, and a stronger platform than ever. But she didn't use it to gloat. Instead, she left the public with this: it's not about silencing people you disagree with. It's about accountability. The media isn't supposed to manufacture reality. It's supposed to report it.